Hello people, so today we are going to learn validations in Laravel, different ways you can validate the incoming data to your application, right? So let's say the user submits a form or makes any form of request, whether it's the user or client, whatever name that is most appropriate. You want to validate the incoming data, make sure that they are what your application is expecting before you make use of the data. So that's what we are going to do today. And to get us started, we're going to do some setup. I've already done this ahead of time, but I will show you how I've done each and every one of these. This is to save us time so we can focus on the business of the day, that is validations. We're going to cover all these validation rules and more if possible, and also interestingly we are going to do some custom error messages and create our own validation rules, some custom validation rules. So without wasting any much of our time, let's get into it. So as part of the setup, we need to create a new Laravel project. You can copy this composer command over to the terminal and paste it. Call the project whatever you prefer to call it. You can call it my app, anything, doesn't matter. You hit enter. It will download a bunch of files and create the Laravel project. I've already done that, so I don't need to create another project. The next thing is to create a model. We're going to call the model celebrity. That will be the model we're going to create, celebrity and the continent that they came from. The user model comes with a new Laravel project. We did not create that. And to create the model, all you have to do is run the command php artisan make model, the model name celebrity. To create the migration file at the same time, both the model file and the migration file, you add the flag, this flag, that's M. You hit enter. That we create this file, the celebrity file, and let me show you what is inside the celebrity model class. So first we have this fillable. These are the columns that are mass assignable for the celebrity model. You also have all these columns in the celebrities table. Then for the date of birth, DOB, you want it to be in this date format. So you add this cast and the format for the date of birth, that is year, month, day. Alright. Similarly for continent, to create the model, you say make model continent -m. This will create the model file and the migration file as well. So this is continent. There's nothing inside there. Let's quickly go down to the migration. I will start with the celebrities, which we have seen the model file. So these are the columns that we have inside the celebrity table. Name is a string, email is unique, date of birth is of type date, age is integer. Of course we can get the age from date of birth, but this is just for demonstration purposes because I want to use this column for integer and min, max, that kind of validations. Career is a string, and then bio is a text which can be longer than string, and link can be a null. Active or not active, that is a boolean, and by default is false. And foreign ID, this defines relationship between a celebrity, and continent. So it is basically saying that continent ID references ID in continents table, right? These are by default from Laravel for the dates field, and this for the primary key ID. So that's what we have for celebrities table. And if we go to continent, there is only one table, one column there, and these other two by default. This is the primary key ID, this is created and updated at, and this is the continent name. So that covers what we have for the models and the migrations. Let's take a look at the next thing that we have here. The next thing is controller. Actually, I need to make the controller. I don't have the controller already. To make the controller, say PHP artisan make controller, artisan make controller, celebrity controller. I think I have a typo. PHP artisan make controller, celebrity controller. Where is the typo? Oh, okay, I can see the typo. So this should be controller. Okay, good. That is going to create this file. Where is controller, celebrity controller, an empty file for now. And then we have the route. So if we go to route, I want to have 3 routes here. The first route will be for a post request to create a celebrity. So say route post celebrity controller class store. So we're going to have a method called store in the celebrities controller. That will be for creating a celebrity, and we should have another one. This is patch. This will be for update, to update a celebrity. And finally, let's have a get to get the list, the collection of all these celebrities. So that is it for the route file. Moving on, for the handler, actually I will leave this for now. We'll get back to it so you understand the need for that. So I think we are ready now to get into the main business of the day, that is validations. So guys, I noticed that I skipped one thing, and that is seeder. And I've also added one thing that I could have skipped as well, database connection. So let's look at the seeder. This is actually for inserting data into the database, and to create the file you run this command php artisan make seed. This will be for the continent table, continent model, so we call it continent table seeder. When you hit enter, you will get this file, continent table seeder. Inside this, what we actually want to do is to insert these continents into the continents table. So we loop through the array of continents and update or create, that is create a new record if it doesn't exist, otherwise update. So when we run php artisan db seed, later we are going to have all these continents in the continents table. Then for the database connection, I believe you already know how to do this, but just in case, so this is database name, this is the username, this is the password, that's all. Nothing much there. Alright, so now we can proceed. Now let's open the celebrity controller file and define the methods. The first method I want to have here is for creating a celebrity. That is the store method. Public function store request. That is according to our route. We say that we should have a store method in the celebrity controller. So I want to have an array. This is where the validation rules will go into. There are different ways. We are going to use different ways for this validation. We are going to use the request validate method, and we will also see the validator class, validator make. Make sure to import the right file. Actually, we get to that. So I will remove this. Let's start with the validate method. So data is request validate, and then what are we validating? What are the rules? The rules defined up there. So the data will contain the result of the validation. That is the data, the input, after they have passed the validation rules. Let's get started with the rules. The first rule here will be for the name column. We say that the name will be a string and it is required. So required string. This means that the name must be supplied, this field must be supplied, and it must be of the type string. To test the validation rules as we add them, let's start the server, php artisan serve. The next thing is to insert the continents into the continents table. Remember that we have this continent table seeder. To do that, open the default file that came with Laravel project. You can see this method, this call blah blah. So inside the array here, we insert the seeder classes. Assuming we have more than one, we're going to list all of them inside this array, so that when we run the command, it's going to look through this array and call the whatever seeder class we have, and they do their job. So make sure to do this, to have this inside the database seeder file, and you head over to the terminal and run php artisan command db seed. This will look into this file and call the seeder classes. If you now go to the database, the continents table, you should have the continents inserted. Alright, for testing, I'm using Postman. So here I've already defined the endpoint. Those are the three endpoints we have in the route file. The first one is to create a celebrity. So this is the endpoint. Take note of the /API prefix we have here, which is the way that Laravel API routes work by default. So even though we did not define, we didn't say /API here, /celebrity, by default, Laravel route API route, we have that /API. Okay, this is a post request to create a celebrity. This is get for getting the celebrities, and this is patch to update a celebrity. Remember that in our controller we now have the store method So we can go ahead to call the endpoint to create celebrity. If I call that endpoint, I should get a response that says, oh, the given data was invalid. That is because the name field is required according to our validation rule here. No problem. Let's go ahead and supply the name field. Actually, I'm using let me go back a little bit, trying to minimize this. Okay, so I'm going to send a JSON data, a JSON payload to that endpoint. I'll say name. I will deliberately pass 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, it's supposed to be a string, and hit enter. It says the name must be a string, correct? So our validation rules are working in order. It is required and it has to be a string. So let's change this to a string. Let's say John Doe, and hit enter. Nothing, of course, no complaint, because the validation passed and we are not returning anything yet. So that is for the first validation rule. Let's look at the next one. Before we continue, let's take a look at one item I said we are going to come back to, the handler. Actually, this is the handler class in the exceptions folder. So by default, you are not going to have these lines I commented out. You are going to have something like this. But let me quickly show you what I want to achieve there in the handler class. So let's go back to where we made the request to create celebrities. This is the endpoint, this is our payload. If we send this, everything okay, assuming that we don't have the required field, we get this validation message, which is a JSON. Now if I remove this header that I added to the request and send it again, I will get an HTML. So Laravel is smart enough to know when you are asking for JSON by passing this header, it is going to send you a JSON response, right? But what if you want the JSON response to be in a different format, in a different structure? What we can do is come over to the handler class and override or customize the exception message. That is what we are doing here. Inside the register method, I have added this. This is to handle validation exception. Make sure to import that from illuminate validation exception. That is imported up here. The next one I want to add is for 404 not found exception. That comes from Symfony. So actually, let me just pause a bit here. So this handles validation exception. We are customizing the JSON we are returning. We want to have these fields in that JSON. For 404 not found, we uncomment this as well. I added these codes that I'm uncommenting now. So for 404, we want to have this same JSON structure as we have for validation. This is actually optional, but just something I want to point out here. So you can add these two validation and JSON responses. With that, if we go back, we expect to have JSON response that matches what we have added in the handler class. So I will send this again, and yes, we get that. We get status false, message, data error, which is exactly what we have here in the handler class. So remember, this goes into the register method of the handler class. We can come back to the controller method and add more validations. The next validation I want to add here is for email. So we say email required to be of type email. Now email has to be unique in the celebrities table. We can do that by saying unique celebrities, comma, email. So this is saying that email is required. It has to be of type email, and email should be unique in celebrities table. Let's give that a try. First, I will send this without email. It will say email is required. Let's add an invalid email. This is invalid. It says the email must be a valid email address. Sure at example.com. So I will send this one more time. Everything okay, no complaint. That is for the email address. Let's go further. Let's add date of birth, DOB. Remember we said that this will be a date of certain format. Required date format, year, month, day. That is the format we're expecting for date of birth. So we give that a try here. It says that date of birth, DOB, is required. So DOB, I will just pass any date here. Let's say 0101. Actually, invalid date. It says the date of birth must match the format year, month, and day. So let's say 1990, which is the format we are expecting. Have an error here. 1990-0101. We send that, everything okay. So the validation for date works as expected. You can change this format to whatever you want depending on your need. So let's look at the next thing. That will be age, integer. Age, we say that age is required. Yeah, age is required. It has to be of type integer, and I want to add minimum of 1. Let's forget about maximum. So we are going to check 3 things here: integer, required, minimum of 1. So we send this request again. Says that age is required. Let's add age here. Age, let's put 0. It says that age must be at least 1. Okay, that's fine. Let's add a string 1. It says that age must be of type integer. So our validation works and everything passes. Everything passed. Alright, that is for age. The next will be, let's do for the link. Maybe a link to their profile or social media account. So this will be nullable. It can be a null. It is not required. And it has to be of type URL. So let's try that. Because it is nullable, we can send and nothing, everything is okay, no complaint. Because link can be null. Let's put link here and try to pass an integer. To say that the link format is invalid. Okay, let's say example. We send again. Oh, it says invalid. Of course, let's make a valid link. http://example.com, and there will be no complaint because this is a valid link. Let's move to the next. validation rule we want to test here. Actually, I want to have be consistent in the quotes. I want to use single quotes everywhere. So the next thing to check here will be career. We say that career is required, and we're going to use a different kind of rule here. So for that, I'll use an array. Remember, you can use array format that as I'm about to use, or use the string format like this. It doesn't matter, whichever one, they all work the same way. So career is required, and instead of using the pipe symbol here, we use this an array, so we use commas. And what I want to bring in here is rule from validation rule in. Let me show you in a moment. So you have to import this from illuminate validation rule. So what is happening here? We're saying that the career must be one of the items we pass into this array. So let's say sports, these are careers for the celebrities. Entertainment, and then let's say the person is a business person, Elon Musk, and other, right? So whichever career we supply in the request payload must be one of these, must be within this array. So we give that a try by adding, let's add career here. Oh, come on. Career, let's say none. We try to send that. It says the selected career is invalid. Of course, because we don't have that item in the array. So let's pick one of these. Let's say sports. And we go over here, we change this to sports, and we are all good because sports is in the array. Alright, and we move on to the next item here. That should be continent ID. Remember in the migration file for celebrities, we have continent ID, the references ID in the continent table. So actually, let me use array. Remember that I said you can use whether array format or this format. So you see that there's nothing special about using the array format. It's because we want to use this rule here, which is not a form of string. So for continent ID, this will be required, and it has to be of type integer, and it has to exist in continents table. Continent ID. So this rule is saying that continent ID is required. It must be an integer, and it must be an ID that exists in the continents table. So exists continents as an ID. We head over to the postman again, and we supply the continent ID. First, let's not supply it. It says continent ID is required. So put a string here. It says it must be an integer. Let's put an ID that doesn't exist. It says the selected continent ID is invalid because we don't have such continent from the list of continents. So let's pick one of the IDs here in the continents table. Let's pick ID 4 because that exists. We enter 4 here, and we are all good once again. The next validation will be for the bio. So I'll say bio. Let's say this is required, and it's going to be of type string and maximum of, let's say, 500 characters. I will modify this when we get to custom validation rules, but for now let's make use of this. So this is saying that bio is required and it is of type string and maximum of 500 characters. For string, it is number of characters. For integer, the max or mean, they refer to the value of that integer. So for age, minimum of 1 means minimum of the value 1, not how many characters. If we say minimum of 10, it means that the age must be 10 years, not minimum of 10 digits. So let's give that a try for bio. So we try to send the request without bio. We get that bio field is required. So we add the bio. Actually, let me copy some text, some random text here. If I put anything here and send everything okay, then let's try to enter text that is more than the maximum of 500 characters. Remember, this is 500 characters, not words. So it will say that the bio must not be greater than 500 characters. Of course, I will reduce this bio field and send one more time, and we are all good again. So far we have covered most of the things, most of the rules we have here. What I want to do next is to show you other ways you can do the validation. Right now we are using request validate method, but we can do the same thing using the validator class, the make method in the validator class. So as we do that, we are going to look at custom error messages and creating our own rule instead of using the rules that comes with Laravel. All the rules we have used so far, they are from Laravel. They come with the Laravel installation, but we can define our own custom rules. That is what we are going to do next. So let me comment this out. I will come down here. Now what I want to do is to customize the message for some of the columns. Actually, customize message. So I'll say data be validator. The validator comes from illuminate validation. Make actually just a moment, that is not the validator class you are looking for, so let me remove the import. This validator comes from support facade validator make. So the validator class to import is the one that comes from the facade, right? And we call the method make. This method will take some parameters, and the first one is the data that we want to validate. So we say request all. The second argument here will be the rules that we apply to this validation. And of course, we already have the rules defined up there. And the third one is where I want to pass the custom validation messages, right? And I will show you in a moment how that works. So we have the data, we have the rules. Here we override some of the validation messages as we see fit. For required fields, I want to change the message that is returned. So I'll say something like, please provide attribute. So let me show you how this works. And to do the actual validation, you call validate. So we say validator make. This will not do the validation per se. To actually execute the validation, you call validate. So we head over to Postman. Let me try to remove one of the required fields and send. It says, please provide name. Let me remove name and email. It says, please provide name, provide email. That is the message we passed here. Before we had this rule, let me remove the rule. The message was different. It says the name field is required. So we chose to override that message. And notice the attribute here. The attribute refers to whatever field that is being validated at that point. So you put the colon, you say attribute, and whichever message you put here becomes your own, is your own choice. So you can put any other stuff there. Whenever it sees attributes, it's going to replace it with the field that you are validating, right? So let's add a different type of custom validation message here. You can actually target a specific field to apply a custom message to it, assuming you don't want to apply that message to all the fields. So for example, I can say dob dot required. So I can change the message for dob, the date of birth, dob is. So you can pass whatever message you prefer here. So whenever it is a dob field and the rule is required, you are going to get this message, date of birth is required. So I will remove this date of birth and I will send again. It says the date of birth, dob is required, which is the exact message that we have here. You can actually modify this further. You can actually do something like this here. Let's say dob dot required. What I want to do here is to make the dob uppercase. So I can say the str to upper, and this will refer to the field. So we put attribute, and we can say is required. Remember we said that colon attribute refers to the field being validated, so we expect to see the dob is required. So let's give that a try, and we get the dob in uppercase is required. All right, so you can notice that we did not need to specify all the fields here. What we are actually doing is to override the default validation messages for selected fields, whichever one we prefer to override. Okay, so let's move on to custom validation rule. Before we move on to custom validation rules, let me quickly add something here. So I'll comment this out. There's a difference. Assuming you don't want to call the validate method here, but you just want to know if validation passes or not. So let me call this validator, because it's going to return validator object. Now what we can do is we can say, if we call this at this point, can see that nothing happens. The validation was not even done at all, right? Because we did not call the validate method on that instance. So you can check if validator fails or passes by saying if validator, validator fails, you can return a response. I say return response JSON. You specify the JSON you want to return. So this will be true if the validation fails. There is also a method called if validation passes. I think now we can specify the JSON structure or JSON response we want to return. You can say status false message validation failed, and say error validator. We get the errors from the validator errors, and data will be no. The reason we are doing this is because the handler class, this is not useful in the scenario whereby we did not call validate method on the validator object. So in that case, we want to return the response by ourselves, right? So I just wanted to point that out. If I go back here now and send again, actually this is a method called errors with the parentheses, not a property. So go back to postman and we get the validation error messages that we are returning here in the JSON. So the next thing I want to do is custom validation rules. Remember that all the rules we have here so far are from Laravel itself, but we can make our own rules. We can define our own validation rules. That's what we are going to do next. So I'll comment this. Actually, these are all doing the same validation, so let me use only one of them. So what we want to do is to define a rule for word count. This can be useful in places like, let's say in bio, instead of the user having to count how many characters, not words, characters in the bio to know whether it's maximum of 500 or not, the user can easily count words. So we can have something like word, I don't know, something really simple like words 50 or something like that. So instead of using counting the characters, we can have word count. This is applicable not just to the bio, but wherever we think word count is necessary. So to define a custom rule, go to the terminal and run the command php artisan. Let's call it word count. Artisan make rule word count. This will create a file in the rules folder, app rules word count, right? So what are we going to do here? In this class, I want to have a public field that will be an integer int, and let me call it word count or count. In the constructor, I am expecting that, so we have count here, and we can set this count to be equal to count. That is for the constructor. This is where we check we write the validation logic. and determine whether it passes or fails. The logic I want to have here is simple. I want to know whether the word count, the number of words in the attribute is greater than or equal to the minimum count I'm expecting. So actually, let me rename this to minimum count. I think it makes more sense. Min count. So that should be minimum count. I hope I did not undo count as a word, case sensitive. Yeah, okay, 4 of them here. Rename it to minimum count. So we can actually do this in one line by saying return str word. This is from PHP. Checks how many words in the given string is greater than or equal to this min count. So basically we are returning a boolean true or false if the value that is applied is greater than or equal to, that is the input, greater than or equal to minimum word count, right? Down here is where we specify the message, the validation error message that we want if this fails. For example, we can say the attribute, just the same way we access the attribute in the controller. The attribute must not be less than, you guessed, this minimum count, and we can add words. So it will read something like the attribute must not be less than 50 words, for example. With that done, we can go back to the controller and make use of the word count. So I can say new word count. Remember the word count. What am I doing here? Word count. Remember the constructor, we pass the minimum number of words that we are expecting. For example, if I say we are expecting minimum of 10 words, and we try that. So let me go back to the body. Are we on send? Okay, for the bio, it says that the bio must not be less than 10 words based on our constructor here. If we change this to say 5 words, you can see we don't have the bio because we have up to 5 words here. So I'll change that back to 10, and we get the error that the bio must not be less than 10 words. You can see that we have covered many rules so far, but there is something really important we have not touched: unique constraints. To do that, we need to have some records in the table. So let me say celebrities, create from the validated data. This we create the celebrity, of course, using this data. That is what the line here we do, and we return a response, a success this time. I'll copy this, come down here, and error will be null this time. Error is null, and the data will be the celebrity, and status will be true. Let's say celebrity created. This we insert the record when the validation passes and return the response. Let's give that a try. I've supplied all the fields for creating a celebrity. And if I go ahead and send this, we get the success. So we have a celebrity now in the database, right? The next thing I want to do is to try to create another celebrity using the same exact payload. So we are going to get the validation error for unique. So I try to send this one more time. We get that email has already been taken. That is because the email has to be unique according to this rule. So let's go back here and say me at example.com, John, Mary, whatever, doesn't matter. And we send that one more time. We get success. So right now we should have two celebrities in the celebrities table. Then there's one tricky thing I need to point out. That brings us to update method, which I've already added down here to save us some time. And I've also added the index method. Remember, based on our route, we say we're supposed to have this endpoint, update, index, store, those three methods. If I actually call the method, the endpoint to get celebrities, we're supposed to get the two that we have in the database, right? The two of them based on the definition for this method. It basically returns all the celebrity we have. That is the index method. For the update, the important thing I want to point out here is the unique rule, unique constraint. Now, let me show you. Let me remove this. Let me show you why this is necessary. Put comma. So if I copy one of these existing emails and go to the endpoint for updating a celebrity, and in the body, let me actually remove all this, and I put this here. If I send, it says not found, the route is not found, splash method, the method is patch. Okay, wait. So notice that this route, we're supposed to have the ID in the URI, and we did not add that here. So this is supposed to be slash ID. That will be the ID of the resource we want to update. So if I go back here, it says that the email has already been taken. What if the email is for the user that owns that record? So let me just pick one. For example, the email for the first celebrity here, celebrity with ID 1, is you@example.com. So I'll come back here and change the email to the email belonging to the user with ID 1, which is the celebrity we want to update. If I send, it still says that the email has to be unique. Why is that so? That is because the unique rule doesn't care whether, it doesn't even know if this celebrity is the same that owns the email that it is checking. That is why you have to add this extra information. This is basically saying this has to be unique except it belongs to this record, right? So the unique rule we apply, but if it's the same record that owns that email or whatever column it is, it's going to be accepted or ignored per se. So with that, if we go back we can send this, and you can see that we updated successfully. Actually, let me update a field here. So for example, the active is 0, which is the same thing as false. Let's change it to true, or you can put 1 here. So we are able to update, change that column, right? Now, I don't think I pointed out boolean validation as well. So for boolean, you can pass true or false, or 1 or 2, 1 or 0. It doesn't matter whichever one you pass. In the database, it's going to be stored as an integer. It doesn't matter whether you put true or false. There's going to be 1 or 0 in the database. So guys, before I forget, please hit the like button there. I really appreciate when you do that. And if you have not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel to help us and to help everyone out there who might be needing this kind of information. So I believe that we have covered everything we listed here in our to-do. So, and I hope that you find this lesson helpful, or at least you think someone out there is going to find it helpful. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.